Yeah, we should get. There's an amazing opportunity right now just to piggyback on the idea of people and stories. As the shuttle program is winding down, we have a chance to look at hardware and people. You know, there's lots of opportunity right now.
But how do we make it effective? Because right now, there's a lot of people that are exactly like Noah, and I see them out there all the time, and they say, well, I'm really excited about this, and I think this is the coolest thing ever, and I'm a Hubble hugger, or I think, satellite dishes are my thing, and whatever it is, I'm a shuttle hugger. I love Aries, but
you meet
what?
those people?
Yeah, I'm making them up. I wish. There are people that are really enthusiastic, but absolutely ineffective in getting other people excited. So how do we do that training? Like, what's missing in the training that lets people be excited and effective in what they're doing? Is that the piece that we're missing? Because it's great when you have a technician that's really excited about something, but if this is the first thing they draw on the kindergarten board, that is not going to work.
It's involvement. It's involving the kids. Noah and Caleb had a conversation about stuffed meteorites when we had gotten here, and me and your father-in-law, we were watching, like, we didn't talk about this stuff when we were a kid, but then I think his name, Sandy, one of the other presenters, he came in, he had this little briefcase of $8,000 pieces of parts that he was going to someday fly up into orbit, and he involved them, and they stood there as if he was like Elvis. Because they were so involved in what he was talking about. He talked to them about their ideas about meteorites and building some contraption to go up and pull all the space debris down. He totally involved them in everything that he talked about. So I think that's what's missing for at least kids his age and parents.
So trying to get their involvement in the story, not telling them a story the whole time.
Right, not telling them a story the whole time,
but actually allowing them to participate in the exploration of what the story is.
Well, that's what we talked about in the CubeSat thing before. Is when you talk about $8,000, that's something a couple, a class could come up with. I mean, that's a number that's not insane. And then you start feeling like you're involved, right? A school could raise the money for that. You could get parents to give $8,000 if you were involved. So we're going to show some videos in about an hour of the Lego Moonbox Challenge. There's these kids that are so excited because they are participating in just doing a fake moon landing with Legos. But they're excited about it because they're doing it, right? They're not watching someone else do it. They're actually doing it. And then you take something like this where you could, in theory, what kid wouldn't be excited about hearing their own satellite from space?
Well, and some kids wouldn't care less.
Well, that's always going to be.
I got a beep. I don't care. I'd much rather be.
I take a 15% gain in kids in the country, though. As far as measuring my success in a program, if I get 15% of the kids in the country really fired up, I'm golden.
Okay. So how do we get people more effective at what we're going to do? Excited and effective. We just stopped being ineffective right there. That's how easy it is. But how do we do that? How do we erase the ineffectiveness and actually give them the tools to connect better and know how to do that where you involve other people in it and be comfortable on stage? Like honestly, just to step out for a second, that's one of the easiest things for me to do is you just throw me in a spotlight and put me on stage and then tell me what I'm supposed to be doing up there. I don't care. I'm willing to be the guy that nobody wants to come to my session. That's okay. I'll be that guy. To go to somebody else's session if that's what you want to do. If you want to be in my session, come here and be in the session. That's great too. But how do you give people that capability to just be okay with either way? And some people have it, some people don't. And then there's a second piece of how do you get them to be effective in involving people and playing to the strengths of your audience, not to your own strengths only. How do you tell a good story that's personable and focuses on the right things, yet still achieves the objectives that you're looking for? Because while you're telling this great story about awesome stuff, we have objectives that we want to meet. We want people to come away with some facts. We want them to actually learn something from it, whether that's a process or a knowledge base or something from it. We're not just telling them these things because we're bored and have nothing better to do. We are still trying to achieve an objective. So how do we make sure that we achieve that objective without resorting to disgusting standardized testing procedures to make sure that happens? I think that's kind of I'm throwing out some big questions for you. And I can't read your name.
Sarah.
Sarah.
When in doubt, we're all Sarahs. We only hire Sarahs at Goddard now. I guess my question really is, one of the things we're not talking about here is what we're trying to get out of this. I mean, I think you look at Deadliest Catch. Deadliest Catch, the crab industry got a huge influx of people that want to be on those boats. I don't know why. I mean, it's a great show, but you couldn't pay me even the money they're making to be there. But they got a huge number of people that work there. I mean, that's your human capital, as NASA would look at it. So, really the question when it comes to being effective is, well, I mean, how do you measure that? What are you trying to do? What are you looking for? I mean, excitement is something. Being critical thinkers in society is another something. Being the next generation of people at NASA is an even different something. And there's a lot of different things we're looking for there. And I think that actually has different ways that we need to approach it, really, for each of those things. I mean, that's the question of why are you doing what you do? When you're empowering, what are you empowering people to do? What's that next step? Because I think it's the step back from what we're looking at. I mean, you can't really say whether or not you're being effective unless you know some way of measuring that.
If you don't know your objective, you'll miss it every time.
Basically.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we always talk at work about, who are you trying to reach? But I usually go, why are you trying to reach them is another aspect of that. I mean, it's not just who you want to talk to. It's like, well, what do you want out of them? You can't expect every person, no matter how much you fire them up, to become the next people that want to be at NASA or want to be crab fishermen or want to be anything. And you actually don't want that. You want a society that supports all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's great when there's a surge in a particular profession, but it actually usually ends up being a mess. When criminology becomes the #1 major in the country, or when, these things happen, the crab fishermen, you end up with surpluses, you end up with weird things. It's like, okay, what's our goal here? Why are we drawing people in? Is it for their own personal betterment? Is it for our human capital? Is it for, and that's a big piece of figuring out what you're doing, right or wrong.
Teacher?
Well, I do it because I'm paid, but I mean, besides that, I am afraid because the students that I had will be making the decisions later. So, while I believe that it's a benefit to society, and it's kind of, altruistic to, I want a better society, but really that's the truth. I really personally feel that science literacy is the key to making good decisions that will protect us in the future. And if we raise an entire generation that's dumb and doesn't know how to think for themselves, then we are screwing ourselves. And I am afraid to live in a country that is like that.
Well, you're not getting any argument from me on those points.
Yeah.
It's mostly just that when we're making these discussions about what we're doing, the grand plans also have to include the why. I mean, if nothing else, there's that question of, if you're in an elevator with a decision maker, what do you tell them as to why they should fund you and what you do?
Yeah,
and
so
it may not be your personal reason, always.
Yeah, we all have this why then, but we all have different ways of doing it. Like your program is structured different than our mission is structured, and we do it because we're told that every mission has to have outreach. So this is our way of doing it. And after all of this, really what I see is the guerrilla method being the most effective, because I can go into a classroom and I can teach that class the way that it should be taught, and I can give a good example to the teacher, and I can inspire the students, and then I can leave, and then I can follow up on it later. And I am not the one that's under pressure from the administrator and the standardized testing and stuff. I can do that flashbang kind of in and out thing. And if I can do that enough, I feel like I can make an impact.
Do you believe that you're supposed to do it because you're told that you're supposed to do outreach, or because you believe in the outreach?
Oh no, I believe that outreach is the way to go. I do. I mean, there's no way I would do this job if I didn't think it was important. But
does with the programs that we've got, and everybody in here that's doing outreach, does everybody have a clear objective, or is it just there must be outreach? Are you given clear objectives as to what you need to do, or are you making them up as you go? I mean, like with the Space Tweep Society,
educate and inspire,
changing perceptions.
I mean, so you're educating factually about what's happening, and then
education can be also teaching people how to think and
like, learn for themselves about stuff. It doesn't have to be just factual.
Okay.
So, but just promoting enthusiasm, educating, that kind of stuff and that wasn't given to me because obviously I came up with it, but I just think those things are really important.
Do the paid programs have things that they, I mean, do you guys have objectives that you have to meet, or do you develop objectives that you have to meet?
There are NASA level objectives
Yeah.
that we absolutely have to meet, but they're pretty high level about certain audiences and certain methodologies and stuff, and we kind of have to match ourselves up with these buckets and
Yeah, it's sort of
they call it a portfolio, but it's mostly
It's a pyramid with buckets.
and quilts and threads.
it's sort of like what we do. We
This
come,
is inspiring the next generation of explorers. We have completely overrun all of our boundaries. We're so far out of the box that
We're breaking the
First thing I said this
Great.
morning was break the rules if you got to break the rules, and
Okay.
crap, I'm in here.
Yeah. So, Dennis.
I think you have to be careful when you have particular milestones that are just, put in front of you. So, okay, reach 10,000 people. Your message can get diluted very quickly because it's very easy to reach 10,000 people. It's very easy to reach 10,000 people with sex and violence. It's far easier to do that and stuff that blows up and people on fire and whatever than it is, with more traditional hard facts and data. I think the trends over the last 5 years really have been, okay, now we have all this data and this data is accessible throughout the planet. The trend has been to make that data look sexy. If you can make the data look sexy and you can sell it that way, then people are willing to look at it. I mean, infographics are just going bananas now.
Even if they're skewed. Okay. So it's and that's what we said earlier, is it's very easy to have a Jersey Shore that's just disgusting and easy to watch because you're like, I can't believe this is actually happening. It's like a train wreck in front of me. I can't take my eyes away. Versus Deadliest Catch or When We Left Earth, that's more engaging in a different way. Which one do you choose? Because there's definitely the easy junk food choice, even in education and outreach.
You can be entertaining and exciting without being trashy. It can happen.
I believe you.
I was going to say, on the subject of getting people actually involved with science and engineering and things like that, you guys might recognize me from that open space movement talk this morning. Now, we haven't even started yet, and in just in the course of like a few weeks or so, I've had people come up to me, like about half a dozen people come up to me and say that because of this, they're choosing to go to college this semester, or they're changing their majors over towards math and physics because they think they're going to be able to actually have a use for that in the future. And I'd just like to say that that's my little contribution so far, even though we've barely gotten off the ground.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's one of the things we identified earlier is that empowering people to be involved in something and giving them a participatory experience can be a huge piece of getting them interested in what's going on. And what was it that you said you have to give them, like let them do it first and then they'll want to learn about how it works later? Give them a framework of learning?
Basically giving them a project to work on, letting them submit their own ideas. Even if they're dumb ideas, they're still learning something. And
they learned that they're a dumb idea because nobody likes it. Well, you have to ask stupid questions before you know that the question's stupid, and I think that's that's part of being on stage, is being willing to go like, shuttle launch 30 years after, the first. No, I didn't. I'm totally wrong, and that's my core subject, so I was wrong. But how do you give them space to do that and ask stupid questions without being stupid?
Well, it's kind of generally expected. I mean, if somebody has a question, we'll have a whole lot of resources for them to say, this is where you want to look at in case you're asking stuff about this. If they go ahead and make something up and it's still wrong, well, somebody else will point them out and say, read this first, and then they'll know why they're wrong. It's kind of a fun process, because a lot of dumb ideas might not actually be dumb to somebody else. Somebody else might say, that actually kind of works, even though the rest of this is kind of dumb, but this actually is a good idea.
And there's a lot of times that I've had people, I've asked a question, and they would say, oh, that's stupid, that's so out of the box, you're totally off base, you have no idea what you're talking about, regenerative braking's never going to work, the components would weigh more than what you would ever get back in the electricity, and 20 years later, they're selling these cars, and it's so cool because when you press the brakes, it recharges the battery. I'm like, I talked about that when I was 10, and people chewed my head off like I was an idiot. And sometimes it's just, if you ask the right stupid questions to the correct people, you redefine what physics is, or you redefine the car industry, you know, and I think that's...
Innovation is driven by failure.
Yeah,
but that's not what we teach, and that's not the societal conversation that we have. So, you know, what do we need to do to keep that in play? And did you have a...
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking, when we're talking about this, like, you know, there are these different ways to connect with people. Like, you know, you have the story method and you have the make it sexy method. And I think what is easily overlooked too is the just giving people like a real small connection with the world, which is how I've always approached outreach, I guess. Like, people come into the observatory and, you know, we're looking at the sun, and some of them, you know, they will ask questions or don't really get it, whatever. But like a question I get a lot is, you know, we'll look at prominences on the sun and they think they're solar flares, and they say that, oh, those are why our communication satellites go down, right? I get that all the time. That's what people know about the sun's effect on us. And I'm like, that's great. This is how I can start talking to them about that. Like, I don't need to tell them everything about how the sun works or everything about our magnetic sphere and all these things. But what I can tell them is this little portion, and it'll get them to ask a question. And I don't know, that seems to be like a way, like then they go home and they're like, oh, I learned this today. It's one thing they learned. And maybe they're not going to be like huge space enthusiasts, but it makes them feel better about asking questions. And I don't know, it's just a little connection, I guess. It's like, I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but
no, I think you are. You're good.
Like so I write for this website called DCist. If you live in town, you might know about it. But we're a news and entertainment website, but and I write about visual art a lot, but I, you know, love space, and so I sort of asked if I could just start writing a space column. I'm like, I know it's not really DC related, but, you know, there's like an, you know, meteor shower coming, I could write about that. And it sort of evolved into this weekly column and got really kind of popular. Like, people really like it, and it's real basic stuff. It's like, you know, well, you've heard about aurora happening. Well, this is kind of why aurora happens. And then people started asking questions, and it's like just little facts, you know, and they're probably not reading about the Augustine Commission on the side, but it makes them think about the world, and I think that is, I don't know, I think that's a good way to try to reach people.
It kind of goes back to the guerrilla warfare that we kind of were discussing a little bit, is that the information needs to be available. Mm-hmm. People need to be available to answer those questions, and not just, sometimes it is, there are needs and times and reasons to be able to say, this is our FAQ. Mm-hmm. But there are other times and needs and reasons for someone to say, hey, do you have any idea what you do when you crank this thing? Let's find out. It all needs to be there, because we all learn differently, you know, from different people in different ways. But the information itself needs to be available, and we need to be able to make ourselves available to and for the information.
Yeah, totally. Like I have this one friend, and I always use her as the example of like the most successful outreach I've ever had. She's a friend of mine, and kind of made it clear that it's not really interested in space. It's really not her thing. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm not going to pressure her. But I started writing a lot about space and just talking about it, you know, just on my Twitter and to other friends and stuff. And one day we were at this concert, and it's an outdoor concert, and she looks up and she goes, "There's Jupiter." And I was like, you know, I didn't even know what to say with her. And now she kind of like, she says it a lot. She'll ask me, she's like, I saw this thing, what's in the western sky tonight? And I'm like, oh, that's, you know, whatever, Venus or something. And it's like, I never brought it onto her, but it was available, it was out there, and she was just exposed to other people talking about it, and now she's interested, you know.
So you created an environment around her that was full of science information that made it easily accessible for her. She didn't have to ask you a stupid question like, I saw this bright thing, and I don't know what it was, you know, and then you get to lecture to her about Jupiter and where to go to find these things.
It's like passive participatory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of like aggressive participatory, it's like passive participatory.
But you made it available to her too. You weren't lecturing down to her. You were like, hey, I'm just going to be talking about this crap all the time. If you happen to pass by and hard to go in your ear, I can't stop that. But you'll probably learn something. And I think that's...
And now she does feel comfortable asking questions.
Yeah. And there are a lot of times where it's... I see people and they're like, well, either I'm doing this or I'm not doing this. You know, like there's an off switch. And some of it is because they're paid, and they're like, well, that's off my time schedule, you know. Or I'm not answering that stupid question about how do astronauts go to the bathroom again. You know, off limits. And
we've all answered that, right? We've all had to answer that question at least once in school.
sponges. No.
They don't. That's usually my answer. Well, they don't.
They just hold it.
Yeah.
Hold it
Yeah.
for 6 months. You know how tiny that place is? Where would you go?
No gravity.
Good
It doesn't go down. They just can't.
I actually use that. Works best in 1G.
It's a micro thruster.
Some restaurants might take offense to micro.
Look at that. I brought up Astronauts King, and now we're totally off topic. I have no idea. I'm like, I have a box drawn on the table.
Effective outreach is about meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's not the size that counts, it's the DV you get out of it.
So how do you do that? I mean, like, so what else do we need to do to get people like Noah effective and engaged and, you know, meeting him where he's at 9 years old? Whoa, go
I'm
away.
sorry. Well, she was looking at me like. Well, you said meeting them where they are. Just a good example is we went to the Crystal City Film Festival, and totally uninvited, we put NASA stickers into tribbles with thank ink, and we threw them into the crowd, and people were coming up to us and asking us about our mission and what things we were giving away, and said this is really where NASA ought to be. And how did you guys get to come down here, and who told you to come here and all that? And it was, well, it was appropriate, and so we went.
I want to tell that story.
Huh?
I want to put that story out. I'm serious to a wider audience because I think it's really important that when people come up to you and they connect with you in public and then they tell you this is the kind of outreach that you need to do, well, that's the outreach that you need to do.
Yeah.
That would work everywhere.
It doesn't matter that it's Star Trek. It has nothing to do with NASA.
Okay,
I mean,
well,
that's the
okay.
problem.
I mean, who
No,
doesn't
that's what
like
I'm saying.
tribbles, though?
That's what I'm saying is that, like,
Yeah, but
one of
NASA
the
uses
problems.
posters that have Star Trek on them.
I know, but I mean, one of the issues is that I feel we are so confined to the story that we are supposed to be telling that we forget that people aren't really interested sometimes in our story, and we need to make it more interesting for them.
To be really honest, I'm really, really paying attention. Like, you know, I don't know, I put on a space conference. I have no idea what the NASA story is.
I don't think they know.
We don't know either.
So that's the problem. Okay, so that's a core problem, right? I mean, so we can do outreach and it's mandated into demographics and all day long. But until that problem gets solved inside NASA, right? And now a subset of you do get your paycheck from NASA in this room. But as a group, we could come up with another way to tell that story, whether or not they endorse
We're
it.
like making the same.
Yeah, not
Am I making you mad, or is that?
So you're saying go around NASA if we can't, like, just like the school system, if we can't get them to play by the rules that we like, then we're just going to go around them?
Well,
That's what I'm doing.
You know what? I homeschool my kids. So.
I mean, you know, is that the consensus? Is that if there's a large organization that the boat is too hard to turn all at one time, you just go outside the boat?
Yep.
Well, and you probably have some of NASA's biggest EPO troublemakers in this room.
Well, yeah. That
So, I mean, we're...
Thank God. But notice who's in the room.
Right.
I mean, that's the conference that we have. But also we had, you know, like, we had a 9-year-old in the room. That's unusual. That is not the type of NASA education and public outreach discussion forum that NASA would put together, in my mind. I don't work for NASA, so you guys would have to say yes, that's true.
Emery made sure he was here.
Right.
That's your friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, his mom, whose name is TJ, works with me. And I have a very small office. There's only about 50 or 60 of us that actually work in the office, about 120 total, but a lot of those are contractors over at Goddard, and I don't see them very often. So it's a small group. There's not a lot of people in it. We got business development people, we got field hardware, we got software engineers. And so she came to me and said, you know, Noah's really interested in space. He's 8, 9 years old and wants to, you know, he wanted to interview me for a class project, right? And we had just done LCross, and so, you know, I've been out there a little bit visibly just because the LCross program got so much visibility, which interestingly enough, NASA didn't plan at all. I mean, NASA had an outreach, you know, that was part of LCross, but, you know, the story that was out there and the amount of media coverage on LCross was incredible. I mean, a lot of it was NASA's blowing up the moon, but hey, you know, you take what you get, you know, yeah.
You totally broke the moon.
We don't have a moon anymore. No tides.
We're not going to see one yet.
And yeah, what happened to the balloon? That's what they asked me.
What happened? Where's the animation showed this glorious plume going up
It
in
was
the
also
air.
like a side view.
Yeah.
But the thing that people
Yeah, where was
focused
that
on the
camera?
most.
So anyhow, he came in and interviewed me. They did a little bit he came in and brought a camera, and they did a little video interview, and he took it and showed it to his class and took notes and stuff. And, you know, because he wanted to. It wasn't actually a class assignment. That was like extracurricular. He came and did it. I mean, is that the kind of kid that NASA should engage? You know?
Are you kidding?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, holy cow.
No, don't let them screw it up.
So, you know, I put the poster up outside my office door, and like she said, she comes by my office door and reads the things that I post up there, and so she said, "Can we come?" And I wrote Mike and I said, "Hey, I've got a 9-year-old kid who wants to come. Can we get his mom a free pass as a chaperone?" He was like, "I'll do better than that." So if you read on the website, you know, kids who haven't graduated high school yet, but you said 15. I don't think we got that many, unfortunately.
No,
but
8 or 9 signed up.
Yeah, so you know they can come free with a chaperone for free. You know, because boy, do we need to engage middle and high school kids or elementary school kids? Absolutely.
So those of you that paid, thanks for helping support that.
Absolutely.
I didn't ask if that was okay from everyone. I just said
do it.
I thought it was worth the shot.
Yeah.
So, and the next time that we do this, because we're going to do this again, probably really soon, we're going to do that again. And I would hope to reach a broader audience. I would love to have 30 high school kids in here.
Yeah. And I've got kids who are my kids are 20, 14, and 10. So the 20-year-old who's now in, you know, community college, you know, he's not interested in this stuff, you know. And my middle daughter's all about the art and music, and so who have I got that's actually talking? It's the 10-year-old, you know, and she's she is somewhat interested, not like Noah is, but you know, how do I engage my 14-year-old, you know, who's into, you know, anime and art and sings in the chorus and things like that. I mean, you know,
Dude, space anime is awesome.
Yeah, well,
my daughter's drawing an anime downstairs right now.
Yeah.
It's probably not space anime.
Well, and I think that may be part of it too. Is, you know, we preach to the chorus a lot, and I know. I mean, this is like a huge box that we could put in, and especially for NASA, I know somebody that I know in the public outreach department of NASA said, I don't want to go back to the same space conferences that we've been to for the last 15 years. And when we don't go to a space conference, they yell at NASA because you didn't bring us a rocket to our space conference. But we'd rather use that money to go out to a new place that we've never been before. And I know NASA's been to the X Games. And I've heard people at NASA complaining, why is NASA at the X Games? That's so stupid. They just want to go out and be popular. It's not about being popular. It's about telling people why we do the space program. Like, you didn't connect those two together at all, did you? You know, like that the X Games didn't deserve to have NASA there because they didn't do anything to deserve it. And there's a big, you know, like, we're better than you. You don't deserve to have us here. If you were really a professional conference, or if you were a good thing, we would be out there and doing that. And I think more and more we got to get out of that preaching to the chorus box. I mean, you want to keep your base excited, but part of that can be also, great, hey, you know what, space conference? We would love to have some of your people go to this arts festival next door that's going on at the same time and talk to them and bring some space art and talk about where it's fantasy and where it's reality, and, you know, how the beauty of space and the colors that you can see with an X-ray telescope that you can't see with a visible light telescope, that you can't see with an infrared telescope. You know, like, tell that story to people, not just you should be at our space conference, but the space people should be at their conference.
It's really something that a lot of policymakers don't get, because they get imminent success from putting it where they know it's going to succeed. You put a NASA booth at the AAAS meeting, you know people are going to be at it because they like science. So they'll go to a science booth, woohoo. You go to the Home and Garden show, they do it anyway. But you know, and I'm happy they go to the Home and Garden show, but it's not a guaranteed success. So they can't, you know, they give out a lot of calendars, but they scoff at a lot of these things when they look at going again, you know, because I'll say, why do we go over and over to the same conferences? Why don't we go to, you know, a history conference and talk about some of our history of science projects? Why don't we go to a PE conference and talk about kinesthetic astronomy? Why don't we go? And people are like, well, I don't know, people probably wouldn't like it. And it's like, well, you don't know, so yeah. It's a huge risk of failure problem. It's also a risk of public image. Aaliyah and I were mentally communing about a fellow troublemaker at NASA and I put together a project called Did You Know? And in fact, this Sarah has some of it on a bag. And the idea was to give little factoids that would get people, not paragraphs, not web pages, they would fit on a coaster. And it would fit on the back of a bathroom stall door. And it would fit these weird places. And we pilot tested it in St. Louis, in a bar bathroom, in a bar, at a bunch of different places. And in fact, this one bar, after the conference left the stuff up in their bathrooms. And for the couple of days after the conference, when astronomers showed up in the bar, and the bartender knew who they were because we had a big party there, people came over and were asking questions about the things in the bathroom stall. We were like, high fives all around. This was the best project ever. We took it to NASA headquarters because we had to have a meeting with the Office of Strategic Communications, STRATCOM. And
that sounds friendly.
They had a very different perspective on what it was we were doing. I mean, what about when the public gets a hold of the fact that NASA's pissing money away by putting up ads in bathroom stalls? And that was really the phrase they used.
In a bar.
Yeah.
So
And then they said, you might be able to have the coasters in Johnny Rockets. We have an existing agreement with them, but not in a bar because it promotes alcoholism. And they said, what we'd really like to see is a pilot test, maybe in a planetarium. You could put it up in a local science center. I mean, do some pilot testing for us that show it works. And I'm like, you just don't.
That's where everybody goes.
You don't get it. Like, I want to give out science factoids in a science museum. I want to give them out in a bar. I want to give them out at Disney World. I want to give them out at the movie theater.
Well, is there a way to meet in the middle and put them in the middle school bathrooms?
Wow.
Official message.
Well, and that's my reaction is like, they would probably be defaced and stupid immediately. But I mean, if they were there, I would say the same thing about a bar at some points. It's like putting up a science fact in a bar, that's not going to work. But obviously, I was wrong.
Well, on the bar thing, I mean, the funny part is we brought this literature because marketing, and I know we're not at NASA supposed to ever use the dreaded M word, marketing, because we're not allowed to advertise. But marketing research shows that these are very effective ways of giving a message. So for example, I mean, you get these ridiculous retention rates for having a message in a bathroom stall because you have a literal captive audience. They will sit there for minutes and read what you put in front of their faces as opposed to print advertising that gets milliseconds. And so it's like, this really works. People have like 80-something% retention rates of reading stuff in a bathroom stall. But, politically, wouldn't want to do that. That's just too weird.
Well, why not do it and not put NASA's name on it? I mean,
well,
all we're trying to advocate space, who cares if it's NASA?
So, of course, then the question is who funds?
Who cares? Collectively as a community, you can do what you're talking about with a very small amount of out-of-money pocket yourself.
Well, so it gets tricky, actually, in terms of the bars and the buses and the movie theaters and everything else. They want money.
If it's NASA, they'll let you do it, but
actually, well, they want money because NASA, of course, is made of it. That's even actually worse. People expect we have more money because we are the government.
Really?
You can afford to pay.
It bars. It can also be with people you have relationships that own stores. This can be done in so many different ways that doesn't require NASA, that does the exact same thing, and it still gets people engaged and interested. So whether NASA understands or not, I don't think it's really relevant. Because we, as a community, selected community, can go out there and we can make it happen.
Which is
we
why,
just have to choose to do it.
Of course, we're going to do it because we do stuff like that. We will go ahead and put unmarked, unbranded things everywhere because that's we do outreach.
I'll give you our stickers.
Well, and this is why we'll happily share the files for people to do it. I mean, I've taken this to multiple conferences and said, you want PDFs that are ready to print, you have to put them up in the bathrooms yourself. We're glad to share them. They didn't work out for us, and we don't want to let the project die.
But this is for people out of an EPO community at Goddard of how many? And they wouldn't do it, unless the right thing to do would be to put the SDO logo on, the print stuff that's put out, have it pass CMR, have it be an official product, and that's the way that everybody else would do it. So what, do we just hire renegades from now on?
Sounds like a Kickstart project. What do you think, Jen? Sounds like a Kickstart project?
Sure.
Well, I mean, does it have to have a NASA logo on it? Can it have somebody else's logo on it? If we can find somebody to donate the paper, can it say Staples on there?
We don't care.
you know.
I mean,
I don't think
personally,
I'll
this
get
project
any
is a
less
pet
here.
of mine because I think it's an exciting project, not because NASA should. I mean, NASA should do it, but not
then
because it has
gets-
to be NASA.
Then it gets to the point where, like, because it's her project, it's not mine, and then I have all this other work to do too, and then in my spare time, am I going to go out and plaster bathrooms? Like,
Well, not to be insulted, but now you're just making excuses. I mean, if you want to make it work,
I
make
already
it work.
told you I was going to do it, but are they going to pay me
Yeah.
to?
It would be nice if the job that you were doing that's being accomplished by what you're actually working on
Yeah.
Yeah.
were the same thing.
Yeah.
And
My rebuttal to that, though, would be that nobody paid me to be here.
Right, but
I paid to be here.
Right, that's right, it's too, right. We don't break even, by the way, it comes out of my checking account,
Does
so
that
we
go
need to
back
break even.
Does that go back to the comment made downstairs earlier that the Solar System Ambassador program at JPL, that's something that should be rolled out across all centres, and it's those guys that are going to stick things up where we might not be able to.
Well, if I might interject, at JSC, the center director has been pushing really hard to work on transforming our culture so that we're more inclusive and more innovative. And one of the ideas that we came up with was to essentially sponsor a competition to get essentially college students that work in marketing, outreach, digital communications, media distribution, get people that work, students that work in those areas to compete to figure out new ways of getting NASA content out there and showing the world what we do and how we do it and why we do it. And essentially, we would give them the content, they would put it all together, figure out how to deploy it, and do it as a competition. That way, it's not actually NASA doing the marketing or whatever you call it. It's the students doing it as part of an educational program. And so if we did something like that on a large level that engaged all of the different centers, that might be a way to get around some of these barriers that we see.
And the other would be if you made those stickers or you made the PDFs and they had SDO on them and you did these things and gave them out and told just, we're going to have these in our office available for you. If you know of a place that would be really great to put up these posters, like, is that something, is giving control out to the masses something that would still get you guys in trouble? Is there a way to not put your logo on it, but just say we've got these that are great?
I was gonna say we just pull the NASA meatball off of them and let them out. I mean, that's already what we do when they do go out. I mean, it's the trick of someone has to fund them. I mean, we can't make the money magically appear for things that aren't condoned by NASA. But when projects like this exist, it's like, well, if other groups want to run them and can come up with the funding, which it's basically paper. I mean, it's not like we're asking for millions. We're happy to share what we've done on things like that. I mean,
I'm just trying to think, like, how do we get NASA to be the instigator? Like, how do you slightly work around it, but like pull it back towards center? Of if NASA was giving out the paper to the bars, or you were going around to places, it didn't say NASA on it, but you said, hey, this is really great stuff. We would love to do it. We'd love to, that it's got 80% retention somehow.
Yeah.
However, if that's like sitting down with people in the bar and just asking them questions about things. Hey, we have a contest. If you know the answer to these 5 things, you get a sticker. Like, not a free beer. You get a free sticker, or something stupid like that. It totally works.
Well, and this is where I think for those of us who do work in the profession, there's a difference between us as professional entities and us as passionate communicators. I mean, I can be Sarah Mitchell, NASA contractor, but I'm also Sarah Mitchell, private citizen who likes science outreach. And so, as the private citizen, I print things on my own dime when I have a pet project I'm interested in. I go to things when I'm not paid to be there and pass out NASA stickers at Star Trek. I've done it too. Whatever it is, we go do it because we care about it. And that's the personal why as opposed to the professional why. So for things like the bathroom project, it's like, well, obviously I've continued. This got killed basically, I think 3 years ago now. And we still, when we have an opportunity, trot out PDFs, print them up, take them out places, but things like printing coasters had a more significant financial impact on us. So it's like I have yet to really have the money, the capital of my own to say I'm going to spend $1,000 to print a bunch of coasters to take to bars. I'm not to that financial. I don't have the money yet. But
what is the?
You'd have to put Miller on the back of it, or
I mean, what kind of numbers are you talking about?
I don't.
Range?
I don't. We printed a whole bunch, and those we actually did legally print. So, well, that was before we were told it was promoting alcoholism. But
which is BS, by the way.
Well, it would be great if there was a way that you could do it and say, we're not going to put NASA's name on it, but the fact that it's effective should be more important than the fact that you may have an image problem.
And that's where private partners are incredibly valuable. I mean, that's really where, when other people want to partner on it, then we suddenly have something viable, because those people can go off and do what they want to do. And I don't hoard ideas, but we can't put money into it from the government.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually at headquarters for a Centennial Challenges meeting many moons ago, and we were told explicitly, oh no, you can't do that. NASA can't have any logos that have anything to do with alcohol or anything like that. And I said, well, what about the shot glasses with a meatball on them? I said, do not call it the meatball, and it is not on any shot glasses. I
have them in my office.
Wait a minute. What are you talking about? There's no meatball shot glasses. And they were like, there are not. We would never allow that. That is against our procedure. I can show you in the book where it says you cannot have that, so it doesn't exist.
They sell them.
And I was like,
in every store.
No, they are not.
The NASA meatball is allowed to be put on other things by other people. Government money did not put the NASA meatball on that shot glass.
It's the private.
Is that the workaround?
Stacy Brooks, private citizen, can steal the NASA meatball off of the website and put it on anything I want. That's why Delaware North down at that gift shop is a contracted entity. Yep. They can do whatever they want with whatever we have in the public domain.
So I can print up flyers that have totally wrong space facts on them with a meatball on it?
Meatball's in the public domain.
Don't they have to
everything we
get
have
approval
is.
for it?
I didn't
Because there's
think
a web page that what's his name, Bert is in charge of, that it says you have to contact him and ask for permission.
In
to
our
put the
visual
logo on
identity
it.
stuff, there are policies.
The logo is, it does
but
have some management.
there are pretty interesting. I mean, it's actually pretty interesting, baffling rules surrounding things like that. I mean, really, like when NASA put out the call for who wanted to be a part of developing the big MMO, the big game, there was, half of the conference they had about who wanted to develop it was what the terms would be about how the meatball would be used in and around the game, and the Space Act agreement through Congress that would be required for that. And it's like, meanwhile, the people at each visitor center gift shop commission those shot glasses, and clearly there's not the
But
same.
a lot of the shot glasses, if you look at them, actually do say, like Kennedy Space Center has its own visitor complex logo that they're able to use a lot more freely than NASA will allow them to put a logo on and sell it on their, you know what I mean?
And when
like,
businesses go into partnership with NASA, they do negotiate things. So, I know our gift shop at Goddard, they commission their goods directly. They don't have the same stuff as any other gift shop, and they somehow have an agreement when they became the contractor for running the gift shop. Who knows what meetings they had to negotiate meatball usage.
And probably somebody at some point was like, oh, I'm sure it's fine, print up 1,000 shot glasses, go.
Well, and that's the apologize later thing.
Yeah.
But so, unfortunately, it's what we have. We all
Ask for
basically do
forgiveness,
that.
not for permission.
If I
And
ask
think that's
legal,
the guerrilla
if I ask
tactic,
legal
too.
if I can do something, then the answer is more likely to be no. Whereas if I've already done it, what happens?
But you
The
can't ask
question
legal.
for those who have fun with NASA legal, and I do quite regularly, if you approach them with the question, how can I do this? You will be much more successful
Absolutely.
than saying,
Can
is
I?
it okay if I do this? So they'll tell you all the reasons you can't. But you have to say, how do I get to here?
Yep.
And tell me how to do it legally. And then most of the time, you can get there. There are a few things that you can't.
What's frustrating though is like, there, the sticker that says NASA critical space item that everybody loves. There had been a lot of talk whenever I'd post one of those, people were like, oh, I want one of those, or that should be a t-shirt. Well, there was a t-shirt of it in the past that was done by some group. Robert Perlman said he was somehow involved with that group when they did that, and if he was, I'm sure they went through the proper channels. So one of the people who's actually here at this unconference asked permission from NASA to make a shirt like that, and the response that came back was so crazy. It was, well, you can't make a shirt with that on it because the shirt is not really a critical space item.
Why did they ask?
Because you have
don't
to.
own the words NASA critical space item. We don't.
But it's the logo. It has a logo on it, and
But
it's.
but
But the
NASA doesn't
logo,
own
we
the
don't own the
logos either.
logo. We own, the only thing we own is our meatball.
And you don't really own that either. As a graphic designer,
It's a public domain.
it's a public domain piece.
It's in the public.
You have restrictions on how it can be used.
Right.
You can't sell a product that has it printed on it, but if you want to print 1,000 shirts and give them out for free, you can do that.
And that might have been the difference, is were you printing them and doing something
I
else
wasn't
different?
doing it.
No, I'm just
Somebody else
saying.
wanted to offer them for
Your
for
friend.
sale.
Yeah.
You know, put them on like Cafe Press or something where people could.
All right, well, just
Buy
that,
them.
I know we're probably getting close because Mike left and it's almost 5 o'clock, so I put down to-dos as a bathroom outreach, new bathroom. But I know we've kind of gone in 1,000 different directions, but somebody said I want to know what to do when we leave this room. So I want to at least have 4 or 5 things that we can point to that are specific deliverable items that we have come up with out of this unconference. No other session did that, so I want to do it because we're totally out of the box.
Have you contemplated Jerry's 9 bathroom stickers now?
He has now.
No, but yeah, now I have.
Yes.
Awesome. I actually want them to be like big ones like that.
If you want to get the coasters put in public places, I know I would be willing to buy, say, 2 coasters if I knew that, my $20 to form those 2 coasters are also forming, say, 20 more coasters that get put in bars by people. That's the basic idea behind the 1 laptop per child. I just,
Yeah.
move it towards.
Sounds like the Cafe Press project.
Sounds good.
Well, another thing I was wondering is, like, you guys who do the outreach for NASA, if you're talking about private partnerships, like, do you guys have a Rolodex of people who can do that kind of stuff, who you partner with regularly? Because it seems like that would be really helpful to have, like, not just space, like other space organizations, but to actually, like, people in this room who actually do space outreach and or, me, private citizen, who would do stuff like that for you. Because you guys think about this all day and you come up with these great ideas that maybe some of the rest of us don't. We have other jobs or whatever. And so when you have an idea like this, just to like reach out to everybody and be like, I've got this thing, I can't do it, who wants to do it? And to have like an actual network. We don't have a lot of that. I mean, it's actually something we really wanted, that contact at Westfield Malls and that contact at, BP. And then, we want those contacts because they actually put money into those things. But it's actually, there are very few companies we work with in terms of just knowing they're going to come through. Yeah. Well, not just companies, but just, like Space Vidcast or groups. Yeah, like that. Yeah, we're a little more connected sometimes with groups because like-minded makes things easier. The minute that they care about what you care about, then we have conversations like this. So.
I will say there are some slightly more altruistic reasons for actually wanting to engage students and get them interested in science and things like that. Northrop Grumman, for instance, has worldwide right now 10,000 open positions, most of which I think, the percentages are kind of flux. I don't really know what they are, but many of those positions, if not most of them, are for engineers. We can't find the people to hire, and the problem is getting worse. And that's been a recognized problem now for 20 years. So, science and technology, STEM, stuff in schools is incredibly important for businesses as well as for just for the sake of humanity.
Tell them to come to KSC. There's going to be a lot of engineers looking around.
Well,
shortly.
Yeah.
The same story in the UK. There is a documented forecast engineering shortfall, and it's why the former science minister went to Richard Noble, the Nancy record holder, and said, "Can you do something kind of awesome, please? Because we need to inspire some new engineers." And that's why they started the Bloodhound SSC project, which is the next Nancy record car, 1,000 miles an hour, and its primary goal is not to appease the sponsors who will be written on the side of it. Its primary goal, top of the list, inspire the next generation of engineers with an engineering adventure.
Wow.
And I think that's the goal thing. That's a need, and that's us saying, okay, we want to help them understand that there's that need there, which is a big piece of it. When people have to see that there are jobs in these sectors for them to be in, and then to say, okay, we want to find a way to inspire kids to be that.
Yeah.
That's a very specific goal that you can measure the effectiveness of, that you can lead towards.
Like the admissions for engineering courses at universities or doctorates and PhDs in their subjects. You can see it in the notable Apollo effect with that thing, and there is a catastrophic decline.
But that's, a lot of people I speak to think that science is basically stagnant, it's done, there's not, there aren't a lot of, I talk to people that regularly feel like there just aren't, it's not a good career path, it won't make them much money, and I can't tell them anything about that. My boyfriend's a PhD student, so, But it is one of those things that you have to tell them, look, these things, there's milestones way down the line. Those are where the jobs are going to be. I mean,
well, it's funny to hear you say that, because I remember when I was in engineering school, one of my professors that was working with us on our senior design project one day said, all the easy stuff has already been figured out. Y'all have to figure out the really hard stuff that my generation didn't get right. So I guess maybe that's part of the problem, is that we're reaching a stage where the problems that are out there to be solved are fairly difficult and fairly complicated, and it can be difficult to distill that into something that you can get out there without having to get into the weeds.
On the other hand, I think that that's not true in some respects. For instance, nobody actually understands how an electromagnetic field actually works.
Yeah.
Nobody can actually describe to you the physical mechanism by which two like poles of a pair of magnets repel each other. Nobody can describe that to you. And when you hand a kid a pair of, super magnets that are this big, and when you get them that far apart, you have to push them together. People are just freaked out by that. You just think they're this big, and you can't put them more than about 2 inches, or you just what is pushing back here? Nobody understands that. So, simple things like that are yet to be discovered. So I don't believe that it's all been discovered yet. Nobody understands how gravity works. Gravity is 9.8 watts per kilogram. At the surface of the Earth, it's a field that's made up of something the size of the planet. That's a really weak field. If it wasn't a weak field, you couldn't stand up. So, how does it work? Nobody knows.
And I think, somebody
that's
said
a
science
great
is
mystery.
dead, and I think it's because what we teach is answers. We don't teach the science, that's the whole exploration thing and inquiry. Inquiry is an ongoing process. Answers are an end. And if you teach everybody, this is a chemical equation that leads to this chemical equation, this is gravity, this is electromagnetism, the end, then they're going to say, science is dead.
Yeah, that's all.
It's a whole bunch of
We did it.
facts. History is alive. You can still go back and figure out new things that happened in the past. How can science be less alive than history? And I think it's all in the way that we've framed things, and we want to teach them these facts, and we want to show them, no, but you don't understand. The shuttle has this many pounds of thrust, and it weighs this much, and it goes into space this fast. You should memorize those facts because they're cool.
Well, I think that gets back to, there was a study done a while back where they asked people to rate examples of where they thought the government had lied to them. And one of the top things that was listed, and this was a write-in, was the Challenger accident. Because everybody had been led to believe that spaceflight was easy, spaceflight was routine, the shuttle was fully operational, and then it blew up in front of everybody's faces, and the public was appalled. Because they did not realize that it was effectively an experimental vehicle that we were still figuring out how it really worked. And so I think that also takes a shift in the way we as professionals approach things, in that we like to make it look like we've got everything under control, it's easy, we've got it, we've got a handle on it, we are in command, we are in charge.
Do you know what you're doing?
Yeah, we know what we're doing.
And failure is not an option.
Failure is not an option. So maybe it does take us starting to talk about things like, well, this is something we haven't figured out yet. These are the problems that we are working on. This is what we're trying to solve, but we're not there yet.
That's why Bloodhound SSC works, because they'd say, right, we're going to build a car that does 1,000 miles an hour. We don't know how yet, but we're going to do it anyway, and you can watch us try and figure that out. And they've signed up thousands and thousands of schools in the UK to be a part of this program and get materials and make little balloon-powered cars and things like that.
Failure is not an option, it's mandatory. That's what science means. That's what exploration is. Exploration is you go until you hit the end. They thought, oops, we're either going to discover something new or we're going to fall off the edge of the planet. Let's go.
So maybe that's an aspect of outreach that we're missing on, is that we're not telling people what problems we're trying to solve. We act like that. We act like we've got everything under control.
We talk about the spin-offs and things that we've done.
Yeah.
And how, look, isn't this cool that we did this stuff? And when they say, oh, were you trying to do that? No. But if I say it was accidental because we have no idea what the hell we're doing, that's probably not going to come out right. So I have to come up with a new thing of, no, it's something that just happened by coincidence when we were doing something else that we know how to do. because we don't want to misappropriate public funds and do something wrong with them.
Well, on those
Pretzels were an accident too.
Yeah.
I mean,
The internet was an accident.
Most-
internet, I mean, all these things.
most inventions we like were. But I mean, that's a story that I love to tell. The one about what it takes to overcome something. It's also a story people don't like to tell because people feel like it makes them look bad, and so it's the harder sell. But it's why Deadliest Catch sells. I mean, what you want to really see as often as the crab pot that comes up full is the crab pot that comes up empty, because you feel for them and you want them to have a better one next time. And you want to see after...
It makes the full pot better.
It does. You want to see that after they try 99 different ways of solving a problem of how they're going to do something on a new mission, that the 100th time works. It makes it that much sweeter. But everyone wants to tout the 100th one as the magic invention, but ignore the 99 that didn't go so well.
How many, does anybody have the statistic about how many times Edison tried something before he figured out the
I think it was 1,000 iterations.
It was like,
Yeah.
Several thousand.
I have problems imagining doing something 1,000 times and getting it wrong and being at like time 947 and going, do about 50 more of these.
But you did.
You know?
You did. You're walking, aren't you?
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
walking.
But it's hard for me now to remember that that's what it took to get there. And very good example. You get wow, right there.
The other problem with admitting that that's the reality of life in science and engineering is that for as long as it's other people's money, whether that's government money or whether it's private money, the guy with the money or the girl with the money is really not going to be terribly reassured that the money is going to do the right thing. Because right next to you, the honest person, there's going to be another one that says, oh yeah, don't listen to him. He didn't know what he's talking about. I guarantee this will work. And that's how we got there in the first place.
And I think that's super dangerous, number one. And I think that's a great story to tell, is that
But it's reality.
if somebody tells you that success is guaranteed, they're selling you a bag of, they're selling you a bag of lies. Because there's no guarantee, there's always a percentage chance. And the fact that we're telling you that we're going to go until we fail, why do you go until you fail? It's because then you know what the failure modes are. Why do you go until you fail again? Because then you know for sure that you're inside of your safety zone. You have to go to the edge before you know how far away from the edge you are. And that's something that investors don't get told a whole lot. Is we have to go over there before we know that it's safe over here.
Because that becomes a science project and investors are not interested in science projects.
They don't think they're interested in science projects. They don't know they're already invested in science projects.
They will tell you they're not interested in a project that is perceived as a science project. Because they have to make the money come back. Right? So that's the dilemma. And they are, without having a background in science and engineering for most of them, they have to decide who to believe. The guy who says, failure is part of it, trust me, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to do as well as I can, but no better. And another person who says, I know what I'm doing, trust me, you will not fail. And how do you make that decision? Well, a lot of the time the decision is made to go here, even though the reality of life that both sides are equally as likely to succeed or fail.
And there is something to be said for saying, I am 100% sure that I'm going to do everything in my power to make this happen, versus I'm 100% sure it's going to happen.
Right.
Like those are kind of conflicting intersections. Is there anything else? So I put down, we need to go to places like doing bathroom outreach. We need to do more of these like buy one to fund 100 programs. I love that idea. If we can find people to buy 2 t-shirts, and t-shirts, you can get crappy t-shirts produced for almost nothing. Or find an angel investor that'll just do all your t-shirts for you and slap their logo on the back. And, sell 5 t-shirts, you fund 500 students to go and do something cool. That's easy. I mean, it's leveraging things, it's what we can do. I love Go New Places. I think sometimes even in outreach, we forget to explore all the different places that we can outreach, so good job taking it to the toilet. And I would encourage everybody to work on failing spectacularly. There are a lot of times where there's like little things that you can do to like test something out, and you kind of like dip your toe in the water, and you're like, I don't know, I'm going to talk to some people and see what they think about this, but if they don't like it, I'm not going to do it. And And then there are people like Mike who are like, so we're gonna hold a SpaceUp conference, and I'm just gonna like start doing crap, or Chris Radcliffe, you know, I'm gonna do this SpaceUp conference. Everybody goes, great, what is it? And he goes, I have no idea, and I don't know where we're having it, but we are having SpaceUp, and it is gonna be awesome, and you should be there, and you see what happens. You know, and I think that's the thing where we're gonna have SpaceUp and it's gonna be awesome. How do you know? Because we're gonna do it, and we're gonna keep iterating it until it's awesome. And that's the way that it goes. It may not work the first minute, but by the end of the day, it'll be awesome, and we'll figure that out. And that's where you can fail 1,000 times during the day, but at the end of the day, if you figured out what makes the conference awesome, day 2 is awesome. Nobody will remember day 1, except for, oh, remember how sucky day 1 was? Yeah, especially compared to day 2, and how awesome it was. And that's the story to sell. That's the crab fisherman that you want them to, you know, the 100th pot makes it work. So how do we go out and how do we, as a public outreach task force, fail spectacularly? Like, how do we go and put things in bathrooms and get smacked down by NASA, and they're so bombarded with so many outreach ideas that are working so well in places that they swear it won't, that their logic breaks down.
There you go.
I mean, if you overwhelm them with numbers, at some point the school system is going to go, we keep doing standardized tests, kids keep failing in society. Maybe we've done something wrong because you guys keep doing crazy stuff and you let them electrocute each other, and, you know, we don't throw potassium in lakes, but, you know, like, you can... Don't do that.
Potassium in lakes? How about sodium?
Francium?
Yes! Don't throw it in things where it's going to kill living animals. But you know what I mean? Like, you guys keep taking them out and launching rockets and letting them roll down hills. God forbid, 6 of them broke legs. And you know what they did later? They graduated from college with PhDs because they figured out that it was an exploratory process. And the kids who didn't break their legs and didn't roll down hills are still working at McDonald's. So maybe it's acceptable losses to have 6 kids break their legs out of a million. You know, to do this activity and have society move forward. So, I mean, is that the general consensus? It's guerrilla warfare, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make it go? Is there other stuff that we should be doing, other than just saying, I'm going to start doing a space show from my basement?
Well, actually, I would argue if you want to see what it looks like to fail, you can tune in every Thursday night.
Mandatory failure just gives you one more chance to do it again.
Yeah. No, I was just totally agreeing with what you're saying. I think we're in a guerrilla warfare. We have to do whatever it takes. No excuses, just do it. Find a way. Fail, whatever, just do it.
Pixar has a mantra that is fail fast. So one of the things I've heard is fail big, right? So fail 95% of the time. So that 5 is worth it. Pixar's I like a little better because you don't have to fail so big. You just have to fail a lot, and then it's worth it still, you know. But in little increments, and then you get perfect. Or no, you don't get perfect. You get close to perfect.
The faster you work on a failure,
good enough.
quicker you get to a non-failure.
And there's, I think, a really good thing to teach kids too, is that good enough is sometimes fine.
Yep.
Because a lot of times science is seen as you have to be perfect for it to work. And like, no, that's why you find the edge, is so that you know you can be like anywhere within this range and you're okay. It's just don't go too far to that end, because that would suck.
Think about your high school chemistry class where you were told to put precisely 10 drops of whatever it was before you blow the whole thing, or you blow the whole thing up. I mean, that's where we get this science has to be perfect, because
Drops.
Recipes.
Drops.
Droplets.
My high school, you measured everything by mass.
Okay, well.
I said it before, perfect is the enemy of done.
Yeah, perfect is the enemy of done. Perfect is the enemy of starting.
Perfect is also the enemy of good enough. And it's different. It's kind of different ways to think about the same, entity. LCROSS was a great example because NASA said this is a Class D mission. That means, by their definition, there's a very good likelihood that you won't actually succeed in your mission objectives. And we're going to fund you anyway because the possibility that you might actually succeed is worth the failure. And nobody actually thought that the mission would actually fly, work, or do what it was supposed to do. And none of that. We hit right. I mean, we hit.
You found water on the moon.
We found water on the moon,
exploration.
But this satellite that we built in 26 or 28 months for, I think the total cost of the hardware to NASA was $59 million. That's what it usually takes to turn a program on. We built and delivered hardware for that on time and on budget, which was, you know, NASA gets you know, a lot of flack for being late and over budget all the time. But NASA headquarters, the people at headquarters who turned that program on, gave NASA Ames, Dan Andrews, the program manager, gets a huge amount of credit for that. But they gave him the option to fail. They gave him enough rope to hang himself and said, "Go get it done." And yeah, we were successful, and it was an amazing thing. But that option to fail, you know, was enough to motivate the engineers who would say, "We can fail at this? By God, I'm not on my watch." You know, and we made it happen. So it was a great program.
But you had failure as an option, and you had failure on the board.
But you don't strive for failure.
No, but it's out there. It's out there. I mean, Chris knew when he
You
started.
don't have to strive for failure.
You don't happen anyway.
No, but you don't have to.
Failure comes easy.
You don't have to be scared of failure. I think that's the biggest thing. You don't have to be scared of failing because it gives you another option to do it again. You know, like if you totally failed at L-Cross, you would have learned something about mission design, about mission something that you could have used in the next mission.
Yeah.
You know, like.
And we came within 4 hours. We came within 4 hours of losing that mission.
Nice.
This time last year, we had blown out almost all of our, Sunday night a year ago, we had blown out 200 kilograms of propellant in 12 hours, where we had been using 1/4 of a kilogram a day. Okay, that mission, if we had, when we came up on Saturday morning on that pass, if we had had that contact 4 hours later, we would have burned too much propellant to be able to succeed in the mission. It came that close, and because we were doing it fast, and because we were allowed to do things in certain ways, there was a piece of analysis that wasn't done. And did we learn a lesson out of that? You bet we did. You know, but we came, I mean, literally, we came within a gnat's ass of losing that mission, and that would have sucked.
That
but-
whole story I heard from Kimberly Enica.
Yeah.
And it was the most fascinating story ever, hearing her tell what happened really, like, behind the scenes.
It was
I wish
electric. It
that
was
that
amazing.
would get out. They should record you guys talking about what actually happened, because it was way more interesting than what happened on the screen.
Yeah. Go read Paul Tompkins' flight director's blog on blogs.nasa.gov.
Okay.
Go read the whole thing, but especially read that part of the story, which is a very long write-up. That was many pages that day. He wrote it about a week later, and it's a very people story. L-Cross is a very people-oriented story. It's not about the hardware. The hardware's nothing. There's nothing that moves. It's all about people and the sacrifices that a lot of people made, 100, 200 people made in order to make that mission happen on time and budgets.
You know, I would argue all space exploration is about the people. It's not about the vehicle.
Yeah,
it's not
I
about
said
the
that.
destination. It's always about the people.
It's about the people, and that was part of the discussion we had about why Deadliest Catch is so interesting.
Yes.
It's about the people. Let me have cares about the boat.
Oh, see, I'm with the class. I'm sorry.
And even if your mission had failed, I mean, this Mars Polar Lander, that they screwed up all the calculations, and between Europe and the U.S. and everybody talking, they're like, oh wait, we should include units in addition to just the numbers? You mean we don't all use the same? Right. Huh. But out of that, we got Phoenix.
Right.
You know, and Phoenix was a phenomenal success, and it launched NASA on Twitter. And I mean, like, it's the reason we're having SpaceUp is because somebody screwed up the units on the Mars Polar Lander.
There's also
Yeah, I know, right? But because we failed, we were able to excel in different and new areas. And I think that's, you know, failure doesn't mean the end. And that's what a lot of people see it as. Failure is the end. I can't do it anymore.
Well, and
it's over.
Not only did it bring us to SpaceUp, but the drama of Phoenix would not have been there if the lander hadn't failed in the first place. Because people wouldn't have had that tension of, oh my gosh, is it going to crash into the Mars? I mean, we don't know, because it could. It very well could. We did it last time. We crashed it last time.
Phoenix was seen as breaking the Mars first, and that was a story.
I mean, it's very hard to do it, and you don't know that it's hard until you fail.
How many
If
people
you do
watch?
it right the first time, then it's easy.
How many people watched the shuttle launch before Challenger, and how many people watched the shuttle launch on a return flight.
Yeah.
You know?
There's also the fact that sometimes a failure isn't really a failure, but you don't find that out until many years later. My uncle was part of a project that went up on Apollo 17 to measure moonquakes, and it was a failure. It didn't do what it was supposed to do completely. But years later, like I think 2008, somebody was able to take that data and go back with more sophisticated computers and actually get something out of it, which I thought was pretty interesting. So,
Lunar Orbiter Recovery Project's a great example of that. You know, they had it was a successful mission at the time, but what they've been able to glean out of that later is incredible. Nobody ever thought that really that would happen, except a couple of very isolated individuals.
But how do we tell that story? Well, not how do we tell that story. We have to tell that story. Tell the story.
Well, and I think also look for the story is a big piece of it, because that's probably the first step, is for a lot of people to rethink the way that they're doing outreach, and instead of looking for the facts and the stuff, to look for the story instead.
That's a great tagline.
Because that's really.
Well, I think that takes people like me. I'm an engineer by profession, so I'm trained to see things a certain way. So telling the story might mean me going to somebody who's not an engineer, somebody who works in like media or visual arts or something like that, and saying, hey, I work on this, I think it's pretty cool, I think it's really interesting, this is what's going on, can you help me tell the story? Can you help me get this out there? And that gets those people engaged, because you're essentially saying, I know I'm not the expert in getting this out there, but I think it's important that we do it. Can you help me? And if you go to people and say, "Can you help me?"
Yeah.
That gets them engaged. That gets them engaged because it makes them feel valuable.
But getting effective can sometimes mean people telling you what's exciting to you is not going to be exciting to other people, and knowing what those objectives are that you've got to reach. You know, are you looking to just load them up on facts where they can pass the test, or are you looking to inspire them to be the next group of people?
I'm saying that can be the start. That can be the start of the conversation.
Oh yeah, definitely. But you know that you said right there, you're going to have to go to somebody else and kind of give up some meaningful piece of control of the project. Yeah. And if they come back and say the coolest way we can do this is going to be pink with flowers, and it's going to be all over here, and like then there's going to be a paper airplane with it, and you know, like that's stupid. I don't care about that at all. Like yes, but who are you reaching?
Yeah.
And is that going to appeal to those people and get them where you want them to go? Or do you just want people to look at your project and think you're cool? Because that's a whole separate issue, I think, inside the public outreach thing, is if you just want to go out and do public outreach so that people think what you do is cool, so they think what you are cool, like people think I'm a dork because I work on science stuff. But if they only knew how cool the science thing was, then I would not be a dork anymore. They would totally think I was awesome because I work on this awesome science thing. You're not going to have effective outreach.
We call that coffee table outreach. You want to produce a lovely coffee table book to show people why you're awesome, and no one will ever look at it. And we don't want to.
Maybe I'm awesome is not outreach.
No.
Just letting you know you guys know now.
But when it comes to telling a
story,
story, it is really easy to engage people when you want to have them to talk about themselves. I mean, it doesn't always work. Some people are very reserved about that. But when you come to someone and you say, you know, tell me about the lab stuff, you get a very technical thing, you know, they're very careful about it, and you say, tell me about you and the background of your work on this, and it's a very different story, and sometimes gets some really interesting results. And that makes it actually facilitates the telling the story, because finally someone's telling you something that's approachable by the public and not an incredibly qualified, highly technical scientific thing, but rather how I got into science and what I love about science and the compelling stuff.
The story, not the equipment story.
Yeah.
The story of the equipment is somebody made it and shipped it here, and then I got to use it. You know?
Yeah.
That's like I have an iPhone. It's awesome, but you know what I did? I bought it at the store, and I took it home and turned it on and followed the instructions. Sweet.
Though something that's really weird to me is that people don't always know they want people's stories, because we did a focus group for Blue Shift, and we asked people to rank all sorts of different topics and presentation styles they'd like. Mind you, just so you know, they want the longest episodes ever as often as we can put them out, like daily 10-hour episodes or something. But human interest stories ranked consistently at the bottom, and when we asked for comments, we got comments like, I don't care about the scientists. That made us a little And my favorite, scientists aren't as hip as they think they are. And the funny part is I thought, I don't think I can tell any of the stories we tell on our blogs and on our podcast without the people. Like, I can't throw out the people, but I have to give them human interest without it seeming like the aw puppies story on the news. You know the one I'm talking about that's like rape, arson, murder, puppies, and then more. And it always feels like, wait, what was that story about puppies, you know? But people have to, you kind of have to not make it that human interest story without, you know, as overtly. But it was funny. Scientists, just so we know, aren't as hip as they think they are. I'm like, well, I don't think most of them think they're very hip.
But it's even more notches. You're 4, but you're not.
How many people saw the movie that was out a couple of years ago called In the Shadow of the Moon? You guys see that? Awesome story. I took my wife to see it at the Senator Theater in Baltimore, big old theater. She went with me just because she was going with me. And this is another movie about science. She loved it because it was about the people.
Yeah, it was great.
That was a very people-oriented story. And the other one that was done by Spacecraft Films was called Live from the Moon. Is that the new one?
I've heard of that, but I haven't seen it.
They showed it at Space Fest in San Diego in 2009 when I was there. And it's terrific movie.
Was the Shadow of the Moon where they actually talked to the astronauts about their experiences on the moon and how they changed when they came back? Yeah, there was like zero lunar footage, but it was like all interview style with, astronauts that I hadn't really seen interviewed before either. It was just fascinating how, you know, they come back and talk. Then I really got into art, or then I really got into religion. And you're like, holy crap, you're an Apollo astronaut. What are you talking about? You, like, went into religion after you went to the moon. Did you notice the going to the moon part? That was cool. Don't you just go like this, like, I walked on you.
Well, it's like back at the American Astronomical Society 09 conference in Houston, they had a media consultant come in and talk about essentially the relationship the space program has had with the media. And he put this one slide up there that compared Apollo 13 to NASA TV. Mm-hmm. And he noticed that in Apollo 13, the shots of mission control were all of the controllers' faces, the people that were working in their emotions, how they were reacting to the situations. And NASA TV just showed a big, huge bank of consoles. You couldn't even see the people's faces.
Back of the head.
Yep.
Yeah, back of the head. And that's what he was talking about, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be the puppy dogs and lollipop story, but people relate to other people, and that's why movies like Apollo 13 or science fiction film Sunshine or Moon, those have all done well because even though it was set in a story about space exploration, the story was ultimately about the people themselves.
I felt really bad for the astronauts, not because their spaceship blew up, but because Madeline's getting sick, you know, and like they're getting dehydrated and it's hard to pee. I mean, it's hard to pee in space to begin with, geez, and now you can't even go, you know, because you got a bladder infection because you're dehydrated, and it's cold as crap in the spaceship, and you see little ice crystals, and you know, if they had just given like a rundown of time, temperature, and water supplies, wouldn't have been very interesting.
I mean, you have a master storyteller. I mean, you have Tom Hanks, who is, you know, one of the bright stars in sort of this generation of cinema, telling that story, and he's telling the story that he believes in and is deeply passionate about.
And he loves
that's not an accident.
Yeah, he does.
Right. But it's not the same story that NASA would tell, and I don't think it's the same story, you know, we might tell. But
NASA doesn't have Tom Hanks.
Or Ron Howard.
Or Ron Howard.
I think that's one of our biggest complaints here, right?
Well, but you know what? We don't need NASA to have them if they're out there doing it themselves. And you know, people work for NASA. They don't work for NASA. They have jobs. They have interests. And I think that's, I want to say, the consensus here is, you know, it doesn't take NASA doing it. It doesn't take the school board doing it. If you just start doing these things anyways, then they get done.
So somebody at NASA is getting that because James Cameron, who is another one of the sort of the bright shining stars, he's working with the folks on the next Mars mission for the 3D camera on top of the lander.
And he stepped in. That camera got de-scoped when MSL's budget first detonated to be stratospheric. And they de-scoped the master cam to take off its zoom ability, so it wouldn't have been a zoomable 3D camera anymore. It would have been kind of like this. And that's what's on board the rover right now. So he went to Belden and said, I'd quite like that awesome camera back. And Belden said, okay, we'll find the money. They got till December. They delivered the new camera, the proper original zoomable 3D, oh my god, movie camera on Mars HD color. Will go.
And with the right tools, he will tell the story.
Oh, he will tell an awesome story.
So I think there's ways that we could get NASA to facilitate, you know, if you go ask for forgiveness and go and make a bunch of tools that people can use and then distribute them freely once NASA says you can't do that anymore.
And it's also, I mean, the access is there sometimes when you ask for it. I mean, that's a piece of it, that the doors aren't as closed at some of the centers as people seem to think they are.
And sometimes when you find a closed door, you just gotta go walk down the hall a little bit.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
I have at every single center.
Yeah, knock a little harder.
I basically the first 6 months of this year, my company basically did a tour of every single center, and we found lots of people to talk to, and we found a lot of closed doors.
Yep.
We were able to find an occasional open one, and those open ones have led to opening all those other locked doors.
Well, one way is if you don't ask, the answer's always no. If you need something from NASA and you're just like, they'd never give me that. Well, no, they won't. You know, you got to actually go and ask for it. They're not just going to come knocking on your door. Hi, you don't work for us, but we thought you might need this info.
But I mean, it's
did you need the meatball for anything?
A free rocket.
Right. You know, would you like a rocket? Is there something that you like? But it's amazing when you hear those. You know, like a student project can go to someone at NASA and say, "Do you have any excess capacity, or could you create excess capacity on this? You know, to achieve these objectives for us?" And they'll go, "Yeah, we could probably do that." Holy crap!
And so maybe that's the to-do action for those of us that are on the kind of on the inside there, is that we work better at establishing networks across the centers to help each other out.
I'd like to establish a network within my center.
I know.
Who are you again?
Yeah. Go new places. If you stay in the place that you're at, you will never meet new people.
But I agree
They
that
rarely come to you.
cross-center would be really nice, because basically I never even know who my counterparts are at the other centers,
Right.
or if they exist. You know, we don't really have that. If you happen to show up at the same conference, maybe there'll be a NASA town hall meeting and I can meet you one time, but, you know, who are you? You know, who are you again?
But that's something you guys can work on.
But
I mean,
it is,
that's not-
but it's
yeah.
also access. I mean, it's really funny to me how these moments like this can make a really big difference. Like, I'm happy to give anyone here my card and get in touch with me. Ask me if we have things. Ask me if, you know, I mean, the worst I can do is say I don't know or no. Usually I don't know is a possibility, but I try.
Have you guys seen Wonders of the Solar System? The BBC series is now airing.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That guy was
Unbelievable.
a rock
Yeah,
star.
Brian Cox is
Now
incredible.
he works at the LHC. This attests to exactly what we were just talking about. Listen to this.
Brian Cox is an amazing speaker.
Laboratory have known about this place, or at least known its address over Bryan, Pasadena, California, since I was very small, because I wrote to them in 1975 to ask for pictures from the surface of Mars taken by Viking, and they sent them. But today, this is the control center for Cassini.
He wrote a letter and they sent what he asked for. And now he works at the LHC and makes TV programs like this.
Now the other side is, if you need something and you don't ask for it, you're not ever going to get it. But if you want to do something and you don't ask to do it, sometimes you can do it anyway. If you don't ask for something, the answer is always no. If you don't ask if you can do something, the answer is sometimes yes. That's a fine line to walk that you have to do.
Never ask the question in a way in which they can not allow you to do something.
And that's what Stacy said about the legislative affair or
legal. You need to go to legal with
Positive.
How do I get to here? Because they are very good at telling you how you can't do something. But if you say, how can I get to here? Even with CMR, our agency logo branding policy, it's how can I make my own invites for my events, because I don't want to go down to you and ask you to do it and you tell me that it's going to be 10 days. Oh, well, just email them out, because the CMR process doesn't necessarily regulate digital content. Oh, well, I can do that, and that's why poor space trooper there gets lots of spam from me now instead of lots of paper. Because
More spam. Send
it's easier to get it through the process if I can just sit in my desk and be publisher and slap the logo on it, and I know where it's supposed to go, and it's probably CMR compliant, but it's done because they told me how to get around it. And they know why, and they want to make it work. A lot of times people want to make it work for you. They just know that they will personally get in trouble if they do it that way. But I'm not going to get in trouble if I do it that way.
That's why I said you have all the troublemakers in here.
Oh yeah. That's what I want.
For the rest of everyone, I am an ass employee, but I'm on leave this week.
What's that mean? She's not representing.
When are we supposed to be downstairs for
charging
Mike
my
to
time.
release this?
A
while back, don't worry about it.
There's an unconference never.
Oh, yeah.
We have the room until 8.
Oh good, we have the room till 8. Sweet. I'm gonna need some water. Do I have any turn?
There's an intern.
You guys are trying to figure out what's going on downstairs right now?
Yes.
My dad wants to finish up with the prizes right now. We're just waiting for people to go downstairs since there's nobody there.
Some people left for dinner.
Hey, run down and tell your dad that he should come up here.
I have all the
That's a
people
little
that I got.
What am I bid for these people?
Tell your dad.
It's nice to be warm up here.
I have all the people, they're sitting down and contained. If I let them go, I cannot
Here, wait,
guarantee their final
I'll just-
destination. Go match up with
Yes,
myself.
I can't go down there again. I'm too tired.
You're young, you'll bounce back.
What do you
Well, I love all this, but I
I
haven't been here like
I went to
2
the
hours.
bathroom
Oh.
and I missed something.
Uh-oh.
But just from what I heard, you know, from coming back from the bathroom.
That's why I haven't gone.
Is that why you're bouncing your legs?
TMI.
Here, I'll take your place. You go.
I can stand up.
Just say you're preparing for space.
Sarah's a test tube. Come on. All we need is the connector and anyway. Or a van.
What was your question?
It's not shut now, but finish it anyway.
It's gone. How come the conversation always turns to that when we're together?
You know we're recording this, right?
And half of my friends are watching. Sarah had mentioned that this is the only place where we find other people like that, and we have, you know, we're heavy on non-EPO people in here, but there's also, you know, us who do it for a living, and then Heather was talking about how she'd like to do stuff with us, and I remember Jen had this amazing idea last year for the International Year of Space Advocacy, and I was thinking that that might be a good hub to bring people together as collaborators in either small projects or outreach things like the Did You Know coasters and things like that. So if we could, you know, maybe if we wanted to rally around that, we could, like us EPO people could provide some things on there, while the non-EPO people who have either time or resources or something like that, they would like to try out an idea or experiment something. Yeah, they could then take ideas from that site, and you know, we can help them organize.
Yeah.
Think of best practices and things that work, and hey, I tried this.
Well, that
and
was
failed, but
the
actually-
idea, right? Was to create a site for collaborating.
It was to create a site to give easy instructions to people that wanted to do something like host a star party in their area, and also to put like a map together, like a crowdsourced globe, to identify all of the neat space attractions all over the world. So like if you're traveling, you could go to it and see if there's something nearby that you should stop and look at, or I just wanted to bring a lot of that kind of stuff together in one place.
That's great, and that's actually the point I was trying to make earlier when I was asking about if you guys had like a Rolodex of people. That's exactly. We'd like one. I mean, it's not for lack of want. I mean, I don't.
Just for lack of.
I was gonna say I don't sit at my desk and wonder how to do my job less effectively. I have ideas.
So Jen, once you're free range, is that something you can take on?
You liar, we've had that conversation.
Oh, this isn't a project.
Just a couple little minor tasks.
I think that if we crowdsource it and have somebody kind of lead the the overall direction of it. That somebody that has more IT knowledge than I do, then it would be good.
Honestly, I'm just thinking, I'm a member of the Planetary Society, and I think this is something they would be very interested in. And they have a lot of experience in building advocacy campaigns and supporting initiatives like that.
Well, I just think it would be interesting to declare like 2012 the International Year of Space Advocacy, and then blast whatever the IYA was out of the water.
And then next year, just declare the next year of International Year of Space.
Well, of course, it's the decade.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
You say, well, we needed to extend it, so now it's the International Decade.
Yeah, but IYA has continued with all the programs that were started that year. There's no reason why a website can't continue, especially one that's taken a whole year to catalog and connect people.
Okay, so who wants to step up?
Who's got
Is
web
there an
space?
IT
All right,
person
we need
in
web
our-
space and a coder, and what are we designing this in? Let's not talk about that right now.
That's a little
I
too
mean,
detailed for now.
You know, like we were saying, it needs like a leader to pull everybody together, but it should be a huge collaboration because nobody has time to take on a whole project in this day and age. There's no way, like, I mean, you know, you need volunteers, you need to actually collaborate on
Oh,
these
man.
things. Yeah.
Oh, God. I have sort of a tangential idea, which is, oh, wait, this is not the same.
Yeah,
thing.
no.
That was on video.
Fail. All right. We'll just put it over here.
The failure is mandatory.
Mike is now going to get a bill.
The race will start shortly.
Not that one either.
Definitely not that.
It's behind here, which makes no sense.
You can do the whiteboard right there. You got the dry eraser stuff on the left.
No, it's not. It's not a whiteboard though.
Oh,
It's just a wall.
It's like just a painting wall. I tried that earlier.
All right.
Whoops.
So we're redesigning Yuri's Night right now to give people party resources, but it's really sort of the same thing because if you're doing an outreach for Yuri's Night, all you're trying to do is get people to go to something and do a party anyways. And half of that is we want them to have science information, so science centers, classrooms, and people at their houses have cool stuff that they can do with people. Once they get them together doing like this, then they can be like, what math? Like that's.
Does the Yuri's Night parties then, I mean, maybe they have to, the focus this year might be, okay, have a Yuri's Night, but these are all the other resources that are available.
And that's, we're actually we have a wiki already in progress, we just haven't linked it out a whole bunch. We've been developing it internally with like, oh my god, where do we put our logos and stuff? But this is, it's already done, there are people already coding on it, and so it's an easy place that we could store stuff, even if it doesn't become the permanent home, at least it's a place to start putting things for now. And you can upload 1 million files and do whatever you want, and we'll give you all kinds of access, because it's open source before there was open source. So, and it doesn't matter. So if you want to, you can stick all that stuff on the Yuri's Night wiki, and you can make a whole branch of the tree and have it be outreach and advocacy things for all year long.
Well, and I have a domain name that can be used at spaceadvocacy.org.
Do you really?
So,
That's you?
Yeah.
Good for you. I'm ready to get that.
I look.
So I mean, if all we need is like a wiki to be started, that's we'll call.
Are we looking for our Rolodex here? What are we actually?
Yeah, what are we doing?
What's
It's
actually
all encompassing. You have information, I have information, she's got it, he's got it, she's got it, he's got it. We all need it in one spot though.
Information.
So when I need your information, I don't even know that you have that
Space
information.
information or what?
Yeah. Space advocacy.
I don't know.
Space
Advocacy is kind of.
If we can't decide,
you're right.
Tony just mentioned that SpaceUp DC apparently has a wiki.
Yes.
That everybody, it's pre-existing, and everybody already knows how to use it. So, there's that. I mean, it doesn't have to be super hard. So.
We can make it super hard.
I mean, the worst thing that happened is we have information in several places that are way too easy to find. Or we cross-link them all together, and then you end up in a link loop. So much fun. All right. Anything else that we need? So I stole all of your people. I'm sorry.
This is the point.
We may have got carried away.
Well, this would be the group that got it right.
Wait.
We win!
You're welcome. All right. Anything else? I mean, I'm assuming this will continue throughout dinner and tomorrow at breakfast, and we'll be chewing on eggs and bacon, talking about making public outreach.
This room is available all day tomorrow.
But actually, what I'd love to see tomorrow is breakout sessions on individual topics, so that we don't have to try to mush it all together into one 17-hour session, and people can break out and be like, things that I think NASA does that are stupid and ways that we can work around them. That's a wonderful topic for a session. Well, but then we have to break that out into separate things too.
But we don't want to write down how we work around them then, because then they'll break that. They'll find a way to kill it.
That's okay.
Don't record them.
Like NASA's watch.
You never know.
5:30 on a Friday.
None of the people who would break it
Well,
down.
that's what you think. Because he keeps on complaining about how much the feed sucks. So.
Oh yeah, you was.
Except for the people on the space station who don't get to go home today.
I'm not following.
They're watching.
They're telling me we should go home at 5:30 on Friday.
Toilets gets people like me.
That's it.
Well, our experiment downstairs, the topic is going to be public perception.
Yes.
So if you want to come and find
Probably did.
Martha and I tomorrow, we'll put it on a pink Post-it note.
Awesome. All right. Anything else? Anybody? Going once, going twice. Mike, I turn it back over to you. Thank you all very much. Like, this was totally enlightening and amazing, and
Somebody make sure
it's the
we
reason
get
I'm
pictures
here.
of all three boards.
Yes.
In high
All
def.
four,
so
actually.
you
Get the Y.
Yes, he's actually screaming.
We need high def pictures of these so that you can actually read them.
Attention.
Whatever.
Last year, SpaceUp San Diego, people kept posting pictures of the, of the board and what was going on in the pods. You couldn't read.
But some were good.
There's a
enough
joke
that were
pick up that's this room. Like, these people are planning guerrilla warfare.
The only thing I have is that technically we're done. So if you don't leave anything here, if you don't want it to be stolen, you can certainly leave stuff here, but I can't guarantee it'll be here, right? So I don't have security, I don't have insurance. SpaceUp DC isn't even a nonprofit yet, which is why I couldn't take a sponsorship from NASA because they wanted to give us money and I couldn't take it. Because I don't, quite frankly, want to have it on my tax return. No, so we're done.
Easy, just go file a tax.
Oh, that'll solve it entirely.
On an entirely separate and unrelated note, I do have a very limited amount of these awesome Yuri's Night Glow Yard shirts.
That might be a short-sighted.
And a very limited amount of these Yuri's Night shirts. They're just the awesome, cool, regular ones. But they're all in American Apparel, so they feel like people just start touching them. People touch them because they're dropping.
Yuri's Night t-shirts.
And the price point has been set at $20.
Goodbye, web stream. We'll see you tomorrow.
That's nice to me.
And then I can leave, and then I can follow up on it later. And I am not the one that's under pressure from the administrator and the standardized testing and stuff. I can do that flashbang kind of in and out thing. And if I can do that enough, I feel like I can make an impact.
Do you believe that you're supposed to do it because you're told that you're supposed to do outreach, or because you believe in the outreach?
Oh no, I believe that outreach is the way to go. I do. I mean, there's no way I would do this job if I didn't think it was important.
But does with the programs that we've got, and everybody in here that's doing outreach, does everybody have a clear objective, or is it just there must be outreach? Are you given clear objectives as to what you need to do, or are you making them up as you go? I mean, like with the Space Tweep Society,
Educate and inspire.
Changing perceptions.
I mean, so you're educating like factually about what's happening, and then
Education can be also teaching people how to think and learn for themselves about stuff. It doesn't have to be just factual.
Okay.
So, but just promoting enthusiasm educating, that kind of stuff is, and that wasn't given to me because obviously I came up with it, but I just think those things are really important.
Do the government, do the paid programs have things that they, I mean, do you guys have objectives that you have to meet, or do you develop objectives that you have to meet?
There are NASA level objectives
Yeah.
that we absolutely have to meet, but they're pretty high level about certain audiences and certain methodologies and stuff, and we kind of have to match ourselves up with these buckets and
Yeah, it's sort of
they call it a portfolio, but it's mostly
It's a pyramid with buckets.
and quilts and threads.
and it's sort of like what we do.
This is inspiring the next generation of explorers. We have completely overrun all of our boundaries. We're so far out of the box that
We're breaking the
First thing I said this
Great.
morning was break the rules if you're gonna break the rules, and crap, I'm in here.
So, Dennis.
I think you have to be careful when you have particular milestones that are just, put in front of you. So, okay, reach 10,000 people. Your message can get diluted very quickly because it's very easy to reach 10,000 people. It's very easy to reach 10,000 people with sex and violence. It's far easier to do that and stuff that blows up and people on fire and whatever than it is, with more traditional hard facts and data. I think the trends over the last 5 years really have been, okay, now we have all this data and this data is accessible throughout the planet. The trend has been to make that data.
You could, in theory, I mean, what kid wouldn't be excited about hearing their own satellite from space?
Well, and some kids wouldn't care less.
Well, that's always going to be.
I got a beep. I don't care. I'd much rather be.
I take a 15% gain in kids in the country, though. I mean, as far as measuring my success in a program, if I get 15% of the kids in the country really fired up, I'm golden.
Okay. So how do we get people more effective at what we're going to do? Excited and effective. We just stopped being ineffective right there. That's how easy it is. But how do we do that? How do we erase the ineffectiveness and actually give them the tools to connect better and know how to do that where you involve other people in it and be comfortable on stage? Like that's, I mean, honestly, just to step out for a second, that's one of the easiest things for me to do is you just throw me in a spotlight and put me on stage and then tell me what I'm supposed to be doing up there. I don't care. I'm willing to be the guy that nobody wants to come to my session. That's okay. I'll be that guy. Go to somebody else's session if that's what you want to do. If you want to be in my session, come here and be in the session. That's great too. But how do you give people that capability to just be okay with either way? And some people have it, some people don't. And then there's a second piece of how do you get them to be effective in involving people and playing to the strengths of your audience, not to your own strengths only. How do you tell a good story that's personable and focuses on the right things, yet still achieves the objectives that you're looking for? Because while you're telling this great story about awesome stuff, we have objectives that we want to meet. We want people to come away with some facts. We want them to actually learn something from it, whether that's a process or a knowledge base or something from it. We're not just telling them these things because we're bored and have nothing better to do. We are still trying to achieve an objective. So how do we make sure that we achieve that objective without resorting to disgusting standardized testing procedures to make sure that happens? I mean, I think that's kind of I'm throwing out some big questions for you. And I can't read your name.
Sarah.
Sarah.
When in doubt, we're all Sarahs. We only hire Sarahs at Goddard now. I guess my question really is, one of the things we're not talking about here is what we're trying to get out of this. I mean, I think you look at Deadliest Catch. Deadliest Catch, the crab industry got a huge influx of people that want to be on those boats. I don't know why. I mean, it's a great show, but you couldn't pay me even the money they're making to be there. But they got a huge number of people that work there. I mean, that's your human capital, as NASA would look at it. So, really, the question when it comes to being effective is, well, I mean, how do you measure that? What are you trying to do? What are you looking for? I mean, excitement is something. Being critical thinkers in society is another something. Being the next generation of people at NASA is an even different something. And there's a lot of different things we're looking for.
To look sexy. If you can make the data look sexy and you can sell it that way, then people are willing to look at it. I mean, infographics are just going bananas now.
Even if they're skewed. Okay. So it's and that's what we said earlier is it's it's very easy to have a Jersey Shore that's just disgusting and easy to watch because you're like, I can't believe this is actually happening. It's like a train wreck in front of me. I can't take my eyes away. Versus Deadliest Catch or When We Left Earth, that's more engaging in a different way. Which one do you choose? Because there's definitely the easy junk food choice, even in education and outreach.
It can be entertaining and exciting without being trashy. It can happen.
I believe you.
I was going to say, on the subject of getting people actually involved with science and engineering and things like that, you guys might recognize me from that open space movement talk this morning. Now, we haven't even started yet, and in just in the course of like a few weeks or so, I've had people come up to me, like about half a dozen people come up to me and say that because of this, they're choosing to go to college this semester, or they're changing their majors over towards math and physics because they think they're going to be able to actually have a use for that in the future. And I'd just like to say that that's my little contribution so far, even though we've barely gotten off the ground.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things we identified earlier is that empowering people to be involved in something and giving them a participatory experience can be a huge piece of getting them interested in what's going on. And what was it that you said you have to give them, let them do it first and then they'll want to learn about how it works later? Give them a framework of learning?
Basically giving them a project to work on, letting them submit their own ideas. Even if they're dumb ideas, they're still learning something. And
they learn that they're a dumb idea because nobody likes it. Well, you have to ask stupid questions before you know that the question's stupid, and I think that's that's part of being on stage is being willing to go shuttle launch 30 years after first. No, I didn't. I'm totally wrong, and that's my core subject, so I was wrong. But how do you give them space to do that and ask stupid questions without being stupid?
Well, it's kind of generally expected. I mean, if somebody has a question, we'll have a whole lot of resources for them to say, this is what you want to look at in case you're asking stuff about this. If they go ahead and make something up and, and it's still wrong, well, let somebody also point them out and say, read this first, and then they'll know why they're wrong. It's kind of a fun process, because a lot of dumb ideas might not actually be dumb to somebody else. Somebody else might say, that actually kind of works, even though the rest of this is kind of dumb, but this actually is a good idea.
And there's a lot of times that I've had people, I've asked a question, and they would say, oh, that's stupid, that's so out of the box, you're totally off base, you have no idea what you're talking about, regenerative braking never going to work, the components...
There, and I think that actually has different ways that we need to approach it, really, for each of those things. I mean, that's the question of why are you doing what you do? When you're empowering, what are you empowering people to do? What's that next step? Because I think it's the step back from what we're looking at. I mean, you can't really say whether or not you're being effective unless you know some way of measuring that.
If you don't know your objective, you'll miss it every time.
Basically.
Yeah.
Because we always talk at work about who are you trying to reach, but I usually go, but why are you trying to reach them is another aspect of that. I mean, it's not just who you want to talk to. It's like, well, what do you want out of them? You can't expect every person, no matter how much you fire them up, to become the next people that want to be at NASA or want to be crab fishermen or want to be anything. And you actually don't want that. You want a society that supports all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's great when there's a surge in a particular profession, but it actually usually ends up being a mess. When criminology becomes the #1 major in the country, or when, these things happen, the crab fishermen, you end up with surpluses, you end up with weird things. It's like, okay, what's our goal here? Why are we drawing people in? Is it for their own personal betterment? Is it for our human capital? Is it for, and that's a big piece of figuring out what you're doing, right or wrong.
Teacher?
Well, I do it because I'm paid, but I mean, besides that, I am afraid because the students that I had will be making the decisions later. So, while I believe that it's a benefit to society, and it's kind of, altruistic to, I want a better society, but really that's the truth. I really personally feel that science literacy is the key to making good decisions that will protect us in the future. And if we raise an entire generation that's dumb and doesn't know how to think for themselves, then we are screwing ourselves. And I am afraid to live in a country that is like that.
Well, you're not getting any argument from me on those points. Yeah. It's mostly just that when we're making these discussions about what we're doing, the grand plans also have to include the why. I mean, if nothing else, there's that question of if you're in an elevator with a decision maker, what do you tell them as to why they should fund you and what you do?
Yeah,
And
so
it may not be your personal reason
yeah,
always.
we all have this why then, but we all have different ways of doing it. Like your program is structured different than our mission is structured, and we do it because we're told that every mission has to have outreach. So like this is our way of doing it. And after all of this, really what I see is the guerrilla method being the most effective, because I can go into a classroom and I can teach it, that class, the way that it should be taught, and I can give a good example to the teacher, and I can inspire the student.
There's an amazing opportunity right now, just to piggyback on the idea of people and stories. As the shuttle program is winding down, we have a chance to look at hardware and people. There's lots of opportunity right now.
But how do we make it effective? Because right now, there's a lot of people that are exactly like Noah, and I see them out there all the time, and they say, well, I'm really excited about this, and I think this is the coolest thing ever, and I'm a Hubble hugger, or I think, satellite dishes are my thing, and whatever it is, I'm a shuttle hugger. I love Aries, but
you meet
what?
those people?
Yeah, I'm making them up. I wish. There are people that are really enthusiastic, but absolutely ineffective in getting other people excited. So how do we do that training? Like, what's missing in the training that lets people be excited and effective in what they're doing? Is that the piece that we're missing? Because it's great when you have a technician that's really excited about something, but if this is the first thing they draw on the kindergarten board, that is not going to work.
It's involvement. It's involving the kids. Noah and Caleb had a conversation about stuffed meteorites when we had gotten here, and me and your father-in-law, we were watching, like, we didn't talk about this stuff when we were a kid, but then I think his name, Sandy, one of the other presenters, he came in, he had this little briefcase of $8,000 pieces of parts that he was going to someday fly up into orbit, and he involved them, and they stood there as if he was like Elvis, like, wow. Because they were so involved in what he was talking about. He talked to them about their ideas about meteorites and building some contraption to go up and pull all the space debris down. He totally involved them in everything that he talked about. So I think that's what's missing for at least kids his age and the parents.
So trying to get their involvement in the story?
Mm-hmm.
Not telling them a story the whole time?
Right, not telling them a story the whole time.
But actually allowing them to participate in the exploration of what the story is.
Well, that's what we talked about in the CubeSat thing before, is, when you talk about $8,000, that's something a class could come up with. I mean, that's a number that's not insane. And then you start feeling like you're involved, right? A school could raise the money for that. You could get parents to give $8,000 if you were involved. So we're going to show some videos in about an hour of the Lego Moonbox Challenge. There's these kids that are so excited because they are participating in just doing a fake moon landing with Legos, but they're excited about it because they're doing it, right? They're not watching someone else do it. They're actually doing it. And then you take something like this where